Good afternoon. My name is Andrina Hidalgo Bergeron, and I'm here today to share my personal experience as a neurodivergent attorney with an autoimmune disease. At the last conference, I talked about how I almost quit the practice of law after 2 years of experience. At that point, I had not disclosed my medical issues to anyone, and unfortunately, my condition caught up with me. I had to be hospitalized for several days. I had my reasons for not disclosing my medical issues or asking for any accommodations. I already felt like an outsider in my firm. I was a Latina in big law from a non-traditional background, from a non-top 14 school. I was the first in my family to go to college, let alone be in a white-collar job. And I'm also the daughter of a father who was discriminated against in the workplace because he's hard of hearing. And frankly, based off these concerns, it created this cycle where I would rather quit while I was behind rather than admit any sort of vulnerability or ask for help. Fortunately for me, my team did not let me self-sabotage myself. They gave me the resources that I needed to not only get better, but return in a healthy way once I got back. And they did this without any pushback. After that point, I felt more comfortable about asking what I needed to succeed in the workplace. And despite my disability, my teams were committed to advancing my career by giving me the right cases and the right assignments at the right time. And in return, I gave them my all when I was at the firm. And frankly, stayed at that firm much longer than I had originally anticipated. And look, the truth is that I know that my positive experience isn't necessarily indicative of what is actually happening in the legal profession, which is why I wanted to share this story really for the supervisors and partners in the room, because I want you to understand the difference that you can make when you're an ally, how creating an inclusive environment can stop talent from self-selecting themselves out of opportunities that they would thrive in within your organizations. As an attorney with disabilities, I wanted to share some approaches that I take when considering reasonable accommodations. The first is that I prioritize my physical and mental health. I know this is something that you may hear frequently, but it's the truth. You have to invest time in taking care of yourself for you to not only be an effective employee, but a happy employee. 2, identify your workplace weaknesses, but also your strengths. It's been my experience that a lot of people focus on the resources they need to compensate for their limitations, but they do this without also considering resources that they could use to enhance their strengths. So I urge you to consider past examples or periods of your life where you were very efficient and successful. What environments were you in and what resources were you using? I learned from my experience in both law school and honestly even undergrad that I am much more efficient at doing the first draft of a written document when I speak it out loud, dictating it, rather than typing it on a computer. Because I have ADHD, sometimes I get hyper-focused or fixated on a little thing like formatting or a particular word of a sentence. And by dictating, it allowed me to get my ideas out on paper. And you may be surprised by how many times accessing resources to facilitate and enhance your strengths is actually not that difficult to find. That is why my next recommendation is to assess available resources at your workplace. For those of you who don't know, now if you use Microsoft recently updated their software, so dictation is actually standard on updated Word and Outlook, and I use it all the time in my practice. But here's the thing. Law firms and businesses need to make sure that employees actually know how to access these resources and ask for accommodations. And I think that's one place in which organizations can work better to partner with their employees to get them what they need. My next recommendation is to actually ask for accommodations when you need them and advocate for yourself. Look, I speak from personal experience here. It took me years to ask for any accommodations. I didn't want to stick out. I recognize that everyone's work situation is different. And there are some of you who might honestly believe that it is not in your best interest to disclose your disability or ask for accommodations. And the unfortunate reality is that might be true. But when you're analyzing whether or not to make the decision to ask for accommodations, I want you to at least consider the following facts. A, you are legally entitled to ask for these reasonable accommodations, and you cannot be retaliated against for asking for these reasonable accommodations. B, even people without disabilities ask for accommodations all the time. They're just called requests. One specific example that I can remember is when a colleague asked for a month reprieve from the in-office requirement because they wanted to go to their parents' Florida house in January because it was too cold. And look, I don't judge that attorney, more power to them, but it made me feel a lot less guilty about asking to work remotely for a week because it was single-digit temperatures outside. And I knew that if I went outside for too long to commute into the office, my hands would change colors and feel like they were starting to burn. And as a result, it would be painful to even type. But the truth is, there would have been a time in the past where I wouldn't have made that request, and I would have just put up with the pain. And see, you are not asking for special treatment. You are asking for an equal playing field. Next, reevaluate and remain flexible because our conditions and our needs change over time, and that's okay. And find support networks. This can be internally within your firm or your company's ERC groups. It can be externally with organizations like the HNBA, and it can even be with organizations that are outside the legal fields entirely. And finally, share expertise and advocate. It's been my experience that attorneys with disabilities are the most resilient and innovative people at finding solutions to balance their disability with their legal practice. And it's important that we share these experiences with other attorneys. That's why we created this section. We want to help you. We want you to know that you're not alone in this process. And we want to give you the resources that you need to succeed in this profession and advocate on your behalf. I want to thank all my fellow panelists for their time and for those of you in the audience for attending today's panel. And I hope to see many of you in March in Seattle.